Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and last week you will have seen that I finally got Harry running properly, but there's still a bunch of things I have to do before I can actually take it for its first test drive. So one of those first things I need to do to actually get Harry on the road, and I actually started already filming the episode and realised I'm going to flip-flop again, is I need to get a clutch going. And those watching a few weeks ago will have seen that I messed around trying to make a universal clutch cable work, and it slipped and it didn't work, and I was having all these issues, and I thought I'm going to go hydraulic clutch. And I actually went through, I bought a master cylinder that can go into my pedal box, and the slave cylinder and all the rest of the bits and pieces, and now I've actually got it here and actually pulled the pedal box back out again. I was thinking this was completely set up for a hydraulic clutch because it's got this mounting spot here, so there is a spot to mount the master cylinder, but there is no spot on the back of the pedal. The pivot is too high. It's this pedal setup is set up for a cable clutch, and I could try and modify it all, but it needs to have a decent bushing. I can't just slap it together. And in the end, I realized I'd also have to trim the bottom of the gearbox up to actually fit the slave cylinder, and that was going to be the lowest point on the car, so the slave cylinder would be actually like the most vulnerable thing underneath the car, which I didn't like either. So I've flopped around now. I've gone to, some of you gave me suggestions on where to go and get a custom clutch cable made up, so I am putting an order in for that. So this is going to have to sit aside, and I need to get on to something else. Thankfully, there is plenty to keep me going on this build, and one of those things that I brought up a while ago was I had a look at my drive shafts, and they were completely shot and had heaps of slop in them, so it wasn't worth trying to order the parts to rebuild them. It was just as cheap to actually buy it, just as cheap. Nothing with Porsche parts is cheap, but it cost a similar amount to actually get a brand new one. So these are all nice brand new drive shafts. So let's install these now, because it's not going to go anywhere until it's actually connected to the wheels. We have nice new drive shafts. They're all torqued up. Another thing I'm going to tackle now just quickly is let's have a look at this exhaust. So lots of guys were asking what this mark on the floor was when I was running the car, and it's all leaking out of the exhaust. So this bit here is part that I didn't touch. This was already done to the car, and obviously it's exhaust leaking there. So I'm going to try and just give that a quick grind back and see if I can just quickly sort of weld it up and make it look a little bit nicer than that, so that it doesn't leak and all the exhaust comes out the end, not out of there. Alright, hopefully that's sealed up much better now. Whatever they did before, somebody's dodgy welding on here, they're added together with my dodgy welding from back when I did this exhaust. My welding has definitely gotten better since then. Let's bring it down now, and let's go and have a look at the front brakes. Alright, well now it is time to start tackling my brake calipers. Now these are something that I actually started 3 years ago or whatever, just before I started the Datsun. That's how long ago it was, and I never got to complete them because I didn't have the seals at the time. I now have the seals and everything, and these need to go on the car before I can drive it. So let's quickly rebuild these. This one's already been disassembled, and I have the pistons here. They need a little bit of scratching up. They've got a little bit of pitting and rust on them, which I've got to get off, but it's nothing excessive, hopefully. So let's go through, give them a good thorough clean and bit of rubber grease, reassemble and get them back on the car. So with these old 911 calipers, one of the things you need to make sure of is the angle of the piston to the caliper for the brake pads to stop it from chattering. There's actually like a, if the camera will pick it up, there's that recessed notch there, and you have to make sure that the angle of that notch is 20 degrees. And I actually made up this piece of paper 3-4 years ago whenever I was doing the calipers, the rear calipers the first time, to help do it. You can get a proper tool from Porsche to get the angles right, but basically it's got to be on a 20-degree angle with the top edge of the caliper in the direction of the travel. I made this up back then, and it's still right. It's I just cut it out to 20 degrees and use this to help line these up. So let's keep assembling some brakes. Okay, one caliper down, one to go. This has all been rebuilt inside. Nice new brake pads. This caliper is actually this is the S caliper. So this was the higher level of calipers for the car. They're quite sought after, and they're plenty of stopping power for this car. Let's keep going. All right, just installed this first front caliper. I got nice brand new discs a few years ago that are installed with new bearings and everything in the front. So that's all done. And now I just did up the brake line. And I thought I'd just quickly mention, I was trying to undo and do up brake lines for ages just using normal ring spanners or normal open-ended spanners, because you can't actually get a ring. If you put a ring spanner on there, you can't get it off again. And I've wrecked that many brake nuts. Make sure you get one of these type of spanners. This is a set from Super Cheap, but basically they've still got 5 of the 6 corners on it. So when you can actually slide it over the brake line and do it up without wrecking the nut. These are well worth getting. As I said, this is a set from Super Cheap, not expensive, worth having if you're going to be working on brakes. Let's do the other one. Okay, so the brakes are now in, but I can't actually bleed them because I still have the pedal box out of the car. It's not worth putting it in until I get the clutch cable. I've ordered it, so I'm just waiting on that. So this may as well stay out, but I still have other things I need to move on to, because I have gone and got myself a new alternator. Now, I knew the old alternator was not great. It was sort of in pieces, and I bolted it back together when I put it in the car. I could try and get it refurbished, but that would take longer. This is going to work. It's going to be right. So I just went ahead and bit the bullet and got a new one. So let's chuck this in the car, and that will be another job ticked off the list. Well, I sorted out some of the reason why the alternator wasn't working. When I actually unbolted it all and managed to finally get it out of the car, I found that the brown ground wires were not connected at all, as in I pulled them, they were sort of part way through the loom, but when I'd actually bolted them back in, but I didn't realise that in the loom they've been cut off previously and aren't connected to anything. Another thing I did find, either way, I'm happy to replace the alternator because it's dodgy. Some of these terminals are all over the place. I could probably get it refurbished, and I can probably sell it on to somebody who wants to do that. One of the benefits about the new alternator is that this one is actually internally regulated. So the old alternators, like on a lot of old cars like I'd had on the Datsun, have an external regulator, which is this thing in the engine bay here, this sort of silver box that basically regulates the power, turns it on and off so it doesn't overcharge the battery. This one has one internally, which like almost every modern car, so that is a big plus. but not having it grounded to the engine means that I have to do some wiring. So first of all, I'm going to check and find the ground wire that I need to run through the loom to get over to here, and make sure I can run a new one and connect that up. And I also need to go through and make a ground strap, because a lot of these on the later cars, I don't know whether all of the early cars had them, but on the later cars, they had a ground strap going straight from the alternator straight to the case of the engine. So I'm going to have to make that up as well. So let's go through and have a look at some wiring and see where I stand. Alright, so I was playing around down in here and realised that after I took out my voltage regulator that I don't actually need this anymore. This big bracket was really just wasted. There was nothing I was really using it for except for mounting my little fuse panel. This little fuse panel does not need all this bracket to mount it in there, so in effort to neaten up the engine bay a lot, I am going through and getting rid of a lot of the unused wiring, tidying all that up, and I've just marked up a little template. This is a tiny little panel I'm going to make up to mount my fuse panel on. It's going to be nice and simple, and I can put it into a bracket that's already here on the car. So that'll be a nice simple little addition to the engine bay, tidy it all up, get it all nice and neat and tidy so that this mess is looking a bit better. Alright, that is looking much neater down here now. I've got my new fuse panel mounting plate in and it's all mounted up. It's all sitting there nice and neatly. I probably will go through at some stage in the future and tear all this out and remake this this part of the wiring loom. It's not very neat and tidy. It could use a complete revamp, but I don't want to go through it now. That has neatened things up quite a bit. And I managed to use a couple of these really cool cable ties that Raceworks gave me a while ago. They're, instead of being like a regular cable tie, if you have a look at this, this one has got a hole on the end so you can put a bolt through it, and this one is set up so you can drill a hole and just clip it in. It's such a great idea for wiring. I'll be using these on the Alpha for sure over most of the wiring loom just to keep things nice and neat and tidy. I need to now make up my ground wire from the alternator straight to the engine. Okay, this is all rewired in here now. I've actually, when I tried to get my ground all the way through the wiring loom, I've actually reused the black wire. The black wire is for the voltage regulator that I no longer have. I've changed it over to the brown wire from this side of this terminal, but from this side it's still the black, just because I don't have another connection for these type of old plugs. It was going to be too hard to rerun the black wire. I know it's the wrong wire and it's not great, but I've changed the end to brown. It's only that sort of middle section that is actually the black. So this is ground along with my new ground I made up that sits onto the engine itself. So that part is all done. Now I need to move on to the part that I've been putting off, which is trying to get the old alternator out of the fan. That wasn't as bad as I was fearing it would be. I thought it was going to be a real nightmare. It didn't come out easy, but the press and a little bit of persuasion, gentle persuasion, helped get it out without damaging the fan or the alternator, really, the old alternator. Although this, I think this is junk. I mean, it might be able to be rebuilt, but the other one is much, much better, big upgrade. So let's reassemble. we have it all back together. The belt is all tensioned, everything hopefully is hooked up properly, and hopefully now I have a working alternator. But I haven't been able to test it yet because I still need to do a couple other things. I need to change over the throttle position sensor that is currently on the end of the ITBs. That is a single throttle position sensor, and I need to replace it with the dual signal one. There's a couple other little things I need to do. I'm still waiting on that clutch cable. Hopefully that comes in the next week or so, and then we can actually start it, tune it a bit better with the alternator working, and it'd be nice to actually get it moving under its own power. But there's still lots of other things to do. The back of the car's not on. The body wiring loom is an absolute nightmare. So hopefully you stay with me for that. As always, if you're going to be shopping for parts for your Porsche, make sure you check PorschePartsByJeff.com first and compare prices there. If you want to help us out on Patreon, or you can do that as well and watch the videos a day before everybody else. And if not, I will see you on the next one. See you guys.